Welcome back to Her Hoops, where we don't do PR fluff, we don't do sugarcoating, and we definitely don't pretend everything is fine when it clearly isn't. Because right now, something very interesting is happening in women's basketball, and nobody wants to say it out loud. On one hand, you've got WNBA CBA negotiations racing toward a deadline that should already have people panicking. Expansion drafts, free agency, the entire offseason hanging in limbo. And yet, the league is still stumbling along like everything's under control.
Well, we're going to talk about Unrivaled, but actually we're also going to get an update on the CBA negotiations, and it sounds, dare I say, positive? Does it sound positive? And I got to tell you this, I will acknowledge one thing. At least Breanna Stewart talks in a much more professional way. There's no animosity towards WNBA owners and NBA owners.
Then on the other hand, you've got Unrivaled, a league that desperately needs you to care, suddenly going all in on one name, Paige Bueckers. Not just as a good player, not just as a star, but as a transcendent, culture-defining, league-saving superstar. And that's where the alarms start going off. Because when a league starts begging you to care, when executives start overselling one player like she's the last lifeboat on the Titanic, it raises a serious question. Is this confidence or desperation? Meanwhile, Breanna Stewart is out here striking a much calmer, more professional tone on the CBA.
Because they're going to shut the league down if you don't. They're not giving you 30% revenue or whatever in the hell that ridiculousness is. And on top of that, you're sitting in front of everybody, in front of all these fans and saying, we don't want raises. They're at 9 times what, by the end of the next CBA, it would literally be a 9 times salary increase. You're telling people you don't want that. You got to be kidding me, right? It's not a good look. After complaining about, because for years all we heard about was money.
Suggesting a deal might be coming, while others seem more interested in airing grievances than actually getting anything done. So tonight, we're breaking it all down. The CBA tension nobody wants to admit. The conflict of interest nobody wants to touch. And why Unrivaled's Paige Bueckers' obsession feels way bigger than basketball. Stay locked in to Her Hoops. To really understand what's going on right now, you have to zoom out, because none of this is happening in a vacuum.
But come back to the table when the WNBA shows it can bring a true profit. Then maybe you can get somewhere. But until then, nah. And we're also going to take a look at, and all this is intertwined. The Unrivaled president, CEO, Alex Brazil, who is married to Nafisa Collier, is begging you, pleading with you on his knees. Paige Bueckers is a superstar.
Because none of this is happening in a vacuum. The WNBA CBA clock is ticking, and it's not just ticking quietly in the background. We're talking about real deadlines that affect the entire league. Expansion drafts are looming. Free agency is right around the corner. Front offices need clarity. Players need certainty. And fans? They're left guessing. Now enter Breanna Stewart, who recently spoke on the status of negotiations.
Breanna Stewart right here, guys.
Timeline's running down the CBA deadline. What's your level of confidence that a deal gets done, and what's a realistic timeline for that, if not within the next 3 days?
Yeah, the next 3 days is tough for sure. I am very confident that we will get a deal done. It's kind of unfortunate that it's taken this long, but hopefully we're going to be able to turn the page soon and really kind of get deep into all the negotiations that we've been struggling to agree on.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And whether you agree with her or not, there was a noticeable difference in tone. Calm, measured, professional. No public shots fired. No scorched earth rhetoric. She openly acknowledged the timeline is tight, admitted it's taken longer than it should have, but expressed confidence that a deal will eventually get done. And that matters, because the opposite approach hasn't exactly helped. Public animosity, emotional posturing, and airing internal disputes in front of cameras.
Brazil framed Bueckers not simply as a headline name, but as a player whose impact reshapes those around her. Paige is someone that raises the level of everyone else, Brazil said. I think that's what's really important. By the way, she did score 24 points in a game that I promise you nobody watched. Can I keep it real? I don't even know what team she's on. I don't even know what team she's on. Just being honest. to lead the Breeze BC basketball club.
May play well on social media, but it doesn't move negotiations forward. These talks require leverage, patience, and discretion, not viral sound bites. At the same time, there's an elephant in the room no one wants to address: conflict of interest. When players who have financial stakes in alternative leagues are also positioned as public voices in WNBA labor talks, it muddies the water. Whether intentional or not, it raises questions about priorities, and optics matter more than ever right now. And this is where Unrivaled enters the picture. Not quietly, not subtly, but with a full-blown marketing push centered on one player. Let's break this down piece by piece, because the way these stories are colliding is not accidental. First, the CBA reality. No matter how tough the public talk gets, the truth is simple. The WNBA cannot afford a prolonged shutdown. If a deal isn't reached, everything stops. And despite some of the louder rhetoric floating around, there is a financial ceiling the league is not crossing, especially when profitability is still an open question. That's why Breanna Stewart's comments matter. She didn't promise miracles. She didn't posture. She acknowledged difficulty, but emphasized progress. That's what negotiations that actually end in agreements tend to sound like. Now shift to Unrivaled. The league's leadership has made it very clear. Paige Bueckers isn't just a player, she's the pitch. The messaging isn't subtle. She's framed as a culture setter, a foundational piece, someone whose presence supposedly elevates everyone around her. But here's the issue. When a league leans this hard on one individual, it exposes a deeper concern, a lack of organic pull. If the product itself was commanding attention, this level of narrative pushing wouldn't be necessary. Yes, Paige scored 24 points. Yes, it was a solid performance. But the reality is, most fans couldn't tell you what team she plays for, who they played, or when the game even aired. That disconnect is the story. And it raises the question, is Unrivaled selling basketball or selling belief? Here's where the contradictions start piling up, and they're getting harder to ignore. Unrivaled executives keep insisting this is about culture, not just stars. About raising the level, setting the tone, and reshaping women's basketball. But if culture alone sold leagues, marketing departments wouldn't be working overtime trying to convince fans that this is must-watch basketball. Because let's be honest, culture doesn't drive ratings. Interest does. Stakes do. Rivalries do. And that's why the Paige Bueckers push feels so forced. When league leadership repeatedly calls her foundational and transcendent, it sounds less like organic admiration and more like strategic necessity. Almost like they know something uncomfortable. Without a recognizable, bankable face, the league struggles to break through. Meanwhile, we're told this isn't about money in the WNBA negotiations. It's about principle, revenue sharing, respect, structural change. But from the outside, it's confusing. For years, the loudest complaint was compensation. Now, as massive salary increases are on the table over the life of the next CBA, the messaging suddenly shifts. That pivot doesn't land cleanly with fans who've been hearing one argument for a decade and another one now. Add in the overlap. Players with equity in alternative leagues, leadership roles elsewhere, and influence in WNBA discussions, and the optics get messy fast. None of this means anyone is acting in bad faith, but it does mean the public story isn't lining up with the private reality. And when that gap widens, trust erodes, from fans, partners, and viewers alike. Let's drill deeper into the Paige Bueckers conversation, because this is where perception and reality start to separate. Paige is a great player. That's not in dispute. She's skilled, efficient, fundamentally sound, and easy to market. But greatness on the court doesn't automatically translate into drawing power off it, especially at the professional level. We've already seen what true needle movers look like. When certain teams come to town, venues change. Ticket prices spike. Broadcast slots shift. The audience follows. That hasn't happened here. Games aren't suddenly moving into massive arenas. Attendance hasn't exploded. Television buzz hasn't changed overnight. And that's not an insult, it's just evidence. Yet Unrivaled's messaging suggests Paige is already operating on that tier. Not potentially, not eventually, but right now. That's a risky strategy, because when expectations are inflated beyond visible impact, the backlash is inevitable. Fans don't like being told what they should feel. They want to discover it themselves. And here's the bigger issue. The league appears more focused on narrative engineering than product evaluation. The basketball itself? Often secondary in the discussion. The atmosphere? Dimly lit, stylized, niche. That's fine for experimentation, but it also limits reach. You can't will mass appeal into existence by repeating buzzwords. You earn it by delivering moments that people feel compelled to watch live, not catch clips of later. Paige Bueckers may very well become that player someday, but acting like she already is, and building an entire league's identity around that assumption, puts pressure where patience might be the smarter play. Now let's zoom out and look at what all this means. Not just for Unrivaled, but for women's basketball as a whole. When a league hinges its narrative on one player, it sets a precedent. It signals to fans, sponsors, and media that the product might not stand on its own. That kind of perception can ripple far beyond ticket sales or ratings. It affects credibility, investment, and long-term growth. Meanwhile, the WNBA CBA negotiations are quietly playing a more consequential game. The WNBA has momentum and history. It has structure. And even with the pressure from expansion, revenue-sharing debates, and salary increases, the league remains disciplined. That professionalism contrasts sharply with the public drama unfolding around Unrivaled. And let's not ignore the cultural messaging. Words like culture setter and foundational are being used almost as a substitute for genuine fan engagement. In reality, basketball culture is built on competition, storylines, rivalries, and moments that resonate. No amount of hype can replace that. Then there's the optics of conflict of interest. When players and executives have ownership in alternative leagues, the lines blur between advocacy and personal gain. Fans notice. Sponsors notice. And that can erode trust in ways that last far longer than a single season. In short, the stakes are bigger than any one superstar. Unrivaled may be trying to fast-track its legitimacy with Paige Bueckers as the centerpiece. But the real test will come when the product, the game, and the culture have to speak for themselves. And the contrast with the WNBA, steady, calculated, professional, could not be starker. Here's the bottom line, Her Hoops fans. What we're watching isn't just basketball. It's a study in perception versus reality, hype versus substance, and desperation versus professionalism. Unrivaled is making a full-court press to convince you that Paige Bueckers is the player who will save the league. The messaging is loud, the adjectives are grandiose, the narrative is carefully constructed. And yet, when you peel back the layers, attendance, broadcast numbers, general awareness, the reality is far less compelling. Meanwhile, the WNBA is quietly doing the hard work, negotiating a CBA, planning for expansion, and navigating complex labor dynamics, all with a professionalism that's starkly missing from some of these public theatrics. Breanna Stewart's calm, measured approach highlights exactly how progress happens, off the camera, behind the scenes, without grandstanding. So, what does this all mean for you as a fan? It means look closer, question the narratives, and don't be sold hype disguised as impact. Paige Bueckers is talented, no doubt. But the story isn't just her. The story is whether a league can build legitimacy through culture, talent, and competitive basketball, not just press releases and superstar spotlights. At the end of the day, the court tells the truth, and time will tell whether Unrivaled's strategy works or if it's a case of style over substance. If you want the unfiltered truth on women's basketball, the drama, and the business behind it, you know where to stay. Subscribe to Her Hoops. Hit like, drop a comment, and tell me, Are you locked in on Unrivaled? Or are you watching the hype and waiting for reality to catch up? Stay tuned, because in women's hoops, the story is always bigger than the scoreboard.